Y'all need to step your game up.
You have come in this class to learn how to die.
Down to like my old granddaddy used to always say, the less a man makes declarative statements, the less apt he is to look foolish in retrospect.
That's quite brilliant, sir.
Oh, thank
The idea that all of this is from a singular source, that this source is ultimately kind, and even though we may not understand the intentions of this source, they were all connected and bounded by it.
Invest in some assets as opposed to trick off my money on some liabilities like diamonds. You know what I'm saying? Cars that lose value as soon as you drive them off the lot.
So you're trying to get land.
Exactly, homie. A real asset. Take care of my peoples, cause you know it look good, but at the end of the day, you losing value, homie. It ain't appreciating. It's depreciating.
Larry, take him out.
Show him Kung Fu Master Larry. Show him Larry. Do him. Work him, Larry. Get him, Larry. Kung Fu Master Larry. Do it. Do it, Larry.
Stop dancing, Larry. Finish him off.
What is this? You all right, Larry? Larry?
I'm all right. Welcome, everyone. This is a Tiny Desk recital of 10-9, y'all, with commentary from yours truly. I am Knowledge Cipher Born, the author. When it is time for me to comment on the poem, I will shift and direct my commentary in this direction. Let's get it. 10-9. A day in the life of a legend named Larry. I've got coincidences to talk about. Don't be scary. And because you saw... Wait a minute. We got to take that back. Two take Larry. We're going to call that one. Here we go again. Take two. Wait a minute. Where is my... Let's get it right. Let's just take two. I did all of that because I wanted you to see the slate. I bought that months ago. All right, here is how we go. 10-9 by Knowledge Cipher Born. A day in the life of a legend named Larry. I've got coincidences to talk about. Don't be scary. And because I saw an omen, you might think I'm joking, but I don't really care. It's just something that I noticed. Now this is how I do this when checking a grip. All these instances are spooky. Please don't trip. All right. For the beginning of this poem, I borrowed the cadence, I borrowed the lyrics, I borrowed the inspiration from my favorite rapper, hip hop artist, Comptonite, and that is DJ Quick. And this comes from his famous song Tonight, where he raps a day in the life of a brother named Quick. See, how does it? I should have prepared by getting a day in the life of I think he's a nigga. A day in the life of a nigga named Quick. I'm just a stubborn kind of fellow with a head like a brick. And just because I drink the 8, they say that I'm hopeless. But I don't really care. It's just something that I noticed. It's just something that, just blame it on the lokeness. Now I'm confusing. I'm confusing my lyrics with Quick's lyrics. Just blame it on the lokeness. Now this is how I do it when checking the grip. Teddy Bear is in the house, so don't even trip. We'll bust some funky compositions as smooth as a prism. So check it while I kick it to this funky dope rhythm. And then he continues on and on and on. Trust me, I know the lyrics, and I wouldn't make that mistake if I were listening to the song as we were rapping. But anyhow, when I put this poem together, it came to me in bits and pieces. So I would write a stanza here and then a stanza there, and then I would rearrange, reorder them. I don't know. I don't know when Quick's verse inspired me, but because I'm a huge Quick fan, it was always in me. It was always resting in me, ready to resurface. Excuse me. Let's continue. 10-9, Law 2 is how my car's license plate used to look. Pockets empty, no job in LA. It was time to book. I traveled overseas, arriving at a new country. Hopped off the plane, got handed some house keys. Settled down and got started earning a salary. Come to find out, my birthday is a national holiday. So this is factual. I mean, the entire poem is factual. And it's also historical, based upon my understanding and my learning of history. This is a personal note. My license plate, the first car I had was in 2003, and my license plate for that vehicle, I got a personalized license plate, and it read 10-9 Law 2. And I was a young man trying to trying to find my American dream. It was difficult. I was a college graduate, but I was not gainfully employed. And so I decided, after receiving information from a friend, that I should travel to South Korea, or I should travel to Asia to teach English. And it finally hit me that, after I had been fired from a number of temporary assignments, that I couldn't support myself consistently, and I needed something that I felt as if I needed a job that I was confident that I would be able to do and that I wouldn't get fired from, essentially. And what I did is, I guess I decided that teaching in English was going to be it. I didn't know that it would be that I would spend 9 years in Korea, or that I would spend 12 years teaching abroad. But when I found that the jobs were plentiful and they were easy to acquire if you had a college education, then I stayed because I was too comfortable. I received a nice salary. I was put up in a home I did not have to pay for. I would rent-free apartment, and my jobs were usually within walking distance. There was no need for a vehicle. So all of these reasons made my life very comfortable, whereas in America, if I wanted to duplicate that experience, I would have needed to take on, or I would have needed to pay rent. I would have needed to pay a car note. I would have definitely needed a job, and none of that was available to me in my home country, in America. So when I got to Korea, well, first of all, I chose Korea because I'm well versed in Korean culture, because so much of my experience in Los Angeles has been influenced by Koreans. From the cars my mom and dad would buy, or my grandmother bought a Hyundai Sonata, to the friends I had in school, to the foods I ate, from kimchi to gimbap. I remember early on having experiences with the Korean culture. And so, and studying Taekwondo. I began studying Taekwondo about 5 years old. So when I decided to ask myself, or when I decided to move to Korea, I had to ask myself, well, where are you going? Which country? China was too far-fetched for me because I had no experience, very little experience with China. Japan was slightly more difficult to get into. I wanted to travel to Japan. I was very much impressed with Japanese culture. I had a crush on a Japanese girl in middle school, but Korea was it was so much easier. All I had to do was apply for the position, and then they were like, "Come on in to Korea." So it was a nice fit for me, and that's why I ended up in Korea. Of course, my aunt Florence Griffith Joyner, whose painting is behind me. This painting was also done by a friend in Korea in 2014, around that time. Because my aunt had won her gold medals in the Seoul Olympics in 1988, it seemed like a good fit for me to travel to Korea to see the Olympic Stadium where she once ran, and so I had many compelling reasons to choose Korea, and then upon my arrival in Korea, within the first year that I'm in Korea, I discovered that Korea's national holiday that celebrates the Korean language falls on my birthday. I thought, wow, that's a pretty cool coincidence. And it only got better because the first year that I was in Korea, it was not celebrated as a national holiday. They had removed it as a national holiday, but it was still on that same day. It was still recognized by the people. It just you just didn't get the day off in Korea. But by 2013 or 2012, they reinstated it, and then from that point on, I was able to have that day off. So that was a very cool coincidence to have a national holiday fall on your birthday, whereby you didn't have to struggle to ask for the day off or ask for time off to celebrate. You could just relax on your birthday. So that was a big, a big sign that I was in the right country. And, I stayed there for 9 years. So I was loving it in some ways. In other ways, I was not. But yeah, Korea was cool. Okay, back to the poem. 10-9 on my mind. I was fine, I thought, until I started waking at 10-9 on the dot. All right, now what I want to say about this is, although the time is 10:09, I prefer to keep the cadence, keep the rhythm of the poem by simply saying 10-9 rather than 10:09. So the time that I'm referring to is actually 10:09, but I'm just saying 10-9. And I'm talking about moments when I would wake up, check my watch, check my cell phone, whatever, and it would be 10:09. Multiple times, then it hit me. These numbers keep coming to visit me. Even when I bought a train or plane ticket, my seat would be 10 or 9, respectively. It was even my group number, which I thought was assigned randomly. All right, so here I'm describing moments where these numbers started to appear or I began to notice these numbers for whatever reason, whether it was a seat assignment, whether it was the time, at which I would check my watch, or it was a group assignment. In 2014, I went to a university in Korea where I studied Korean, and I was assigned to group 1009. And I thought, here are these numbers again. So I took a photo to document it and just made a mental note. Man, I keep seeing these numbers 10 and 9, so. One more thing. At this point in the journey, 10-9 is simply a reference to my birthday. That's it. All I'm doing is looking at it and say, hey, that's my birthday. Ooh, that's cool. That's my birthday. Hey, that's me. That's my birthday. Wow, it's my group number. It's also my birthday. That's the time I woke up. Hey, that's my birthday. Look at this. It was all about simply my birthday. That's all that I read into this experience. when I started to learn that, 109 is an angel number. If you search angel numbers on Google, every number is an angel number. But when you discover that there is another significance, whether it be an angel number, whether it be a numerological explanation, whether it be the Yoruban explanation, whether it be an explanation from the nation of gods and earths, your experience, your understanding of these different schools will inform you of the meaning of these things. But for me, it only meant at that time it was my birthday, and that was it. I didn't look any further than that. Cut to the day at Addis Ababa University, learning Ethiopian history. I went to the bathroom on the second floor. Yep, you guessed it. 109 was written on the door. And that's exactly what happened. Now, picture this. You're on the second floor, going to the bathroom, minding your own business, but you're on the second floor, and the door has the number 109, or it has a number written that begins with the number 1. Okay. First, let's attack the number 1. All right. If you're on the second floor, the door number should begin with the number 2, and it actually did. Okay, it's like 201, 202, maybe 202, 203. I forget the picture, but those numbers, the actual door number that was affixed to the door. Okay, so that corresponded with the floor, and that's what you would expect. Now, the number 109 was written on that door, and I did not write these numbers, okay? But I saw those numbers, 10 and 9, written on the door, and I thought, that's interesting, that's peculiar, because those are my numbers. But I'm not in South Korea. I'm in Ethiopia. And so I'm wondering, what do these numbers, mean in Ethiopia? And to whom do they mean something? And why did they write those numbers on the door? I had all of these questions, and all I could do is snap the photo for evidence and then go into the restroom to do my business and get on with my day. But it certainly it was a head scratcher for sure. And then the last thing that I'll say is, I'm so glad that I saw those numbers. But then again, it could be a matter of destiny, and me having seen those, that was my destiny. But I'm so glad that I saw those numbers in Ethiopia, because Ethiopia became a greater part of the story of 109, a significant part of 109. Let's continue. Even my cousin Anwar told me to connect with Inca spirits in Peru. He said, at Machu Picchu, ancestral spirits will greet you. I ascended Montaña Machu Picchu that morning around 8. Took a look around, enjoying the view. Great. Checked my watch, it read 10:08. I knew the spirits were telling me to start my descent, so a minute later I did, to stay within tradition. All right, so with this stanza, or these couple of stanzas, the tradition I'm talking about is seeing the numbers 10 and 9, or the time 10:09, and having that resonate with me. And so the tradition was, at that moment, I would take a mental note of that. But here I am now in Peru. And this is a couple of years after my cousin Anwar informed me. This is after Anwar had been to Peru. He had been to Machu Picchu. But he tells me, hey, if you go to Machu Picchu, you should go early in the morning. You should meditate, because the spirits will meet you. They'll greet you, so to speak. He says this to me. And I said, okay, cool. So I made a mental note of that. So when I finally did get to Machu Picchu, I had this experience whereby I was not paying a close attention to the time. However, when I arrived, when I summited the mountain, I checked my watch and it was 10:08. Then it was like, hey, you know what? You've seen these numbers. You've seen these numbers in Ethiopia. You've seen them in South Korea. Now you're seeing them in Peru. So now 10:09 is starting to settle in. It's starting to morph into something spiritual. Before it was just a neat coincidence. Hey, that's my birthday. But now it's morphing into something very kind of tangible. It's like, oh my gosh, these are actual spirits communicating with me. And it's been happening year in and year out. So it's really starting to resonate with me deeply. And so in that moment, I make the decision to go down the mountain. I had gone up, I had summited the mountain, checked my watch. It was 10:08, and I said, okay, these are the spirits. They're contacting me. And basically, atop the mountain, I had taken as many selfies as I could, and I didn't know what else to do. And I said, okay, maybe the spirits are telling me I should go down the mountain. This was my summation. I said, okay, they're telling me go down. So to stay within the tradition of seeing these numbers, there I saw them atop Machu Picchu. I decided I'm going to take that as a sign to descend the mountain. And that's what I did. So even in Peru, atop Machu Picchu, 10:09, met me. The spirits met me there. Because that's what it's becoming. It's becoming a spiritual experience. Let's continue. While in Havana, Cuba one night, I read about Ernesto Che Guevara de la Serna's life. Imagine the sight when I read that he was captured on the 8th of October and on 10/9 lost his life. So I went from South Korea to, or at least I'm telling the story. This is not in chronological order. It was South Korea. In the poem, it's South Korea, then Ethiopia, and then Peru, and then Havana, Cuba. But that's not exactly the chronological order. Anyhow, now I'm mentioning Havana, Cuba. And just as I said, one night I was reading Che Guevara's motorcycle diaries, and within the first few pages, there's his biography, and I'm reading that he was killed on October 9th. Now, here's the thing about this moment and finding this information. If I had learned that Che Guevara died on October 9th in Los Angeles, or in South Korea, or in Ethiopia, or wherever, if someone brought this information to me and said, hey, you were born on October 9th? Hey, well, Che Guevara died on October 9th. I'd probably say, hey, that's cool. That's interesting. And then that would be it. But I was actually in Havana, Cuba. Not his country of origin, but in the country whereby he led the Cuban Revolution alongside Fidel Castro. So I'm like, dude, this 10/9 experience has become a more spiritual experience for me, especially after Peru. And there I was, and I think Peru became, I think Peru happened before Havana, Cuba. But I think that's chronologically, to be technical, to be accurate, I think Cuba happened first. All right, so Cuba happened before Peru. But the spiritual aspect was definitely building and resonating with me. So when I'm in Cuba and I'm reading this book, and I'm like, dude, it's as if Che Guevara's spirit has led me to Cuba. And so there I was reading about his life and seeing 10/9 right there within the first few pages. And I felt like, wow, I'm learning about this here in Cuba. I'm not learning about this in any other place. It really, was deep. It was a profound moment for me related to 10/9. So these lights are bright. All right, so back to the poem. In Saudi Arabia, held a cab, and when it came near, the license plate read 10-9, and it had me feeling weird. If anything, I could say that this cab was rare, but I thought, nah, forget it. Yo, Holmes, I'm not scared. All right, this stanza should sound familiar because I borrowed the cadence, I borrowed the lyrics from Fresh Prince of Bel-Air theme song written by Will Smith. All right, and this is essentially what happened. I hailed a cab, and it started with 10-9. The license plate started with 10-9, so I was like, wow, that is just for me. Remember, in the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, he whistled for a cab, and when he came near, the license plate read fresh, and it had dice in the mirror. So he thought, man, this is just for me. So these lyrics fit perfectly. And this is honestly what happened when I arrived at the Dammam airport in Saudi Arabia. Now, think about this. If I had been a minute earlier, or even 10 minutes earlier, or later, a minute later, 10 minutes later, that taxi cab would have gone to some other passenger. And so now we're playing with the idea of destiny because we matched. That car matched with me, and those were my numbers. I got that car. I took that taxi home. So there you have it. Another spiritual encounter. This time it was in Saudi Arabia. Continuing. I began to think these coincidences are signs. Why else would a man's death coincide on the same week as is celebrated Muhammad's rise? Peace be upon him. In other words, that same week Muslims celebrated Muhammad's ascension to heaven. It's funny how every 7 days leading up, I was greeted by a new revelation. All right, you guys. So specifically, the week of March 31st, 2019, there was I believe it was the beginning of an Eid celebration in the Muslim countries, and the Muslims essentially were celebrating Prophet Muhammad's ascension to heaven that week. So when I say that a man's death coincided on the same week as the week that they were praying and celebrating Muhammad's ascension to heaven, a man, I believed, died and was also ascending to heaven. So the nature of these two events coinciding was very interesting. So I had to point that out. Of course, I'm referring to Nipsey Hussle. Let's continue with, now I will describe the month of March in 2019 and everything that happened, including 28 days before his murder. All right, let's get into it. 28 days earlier, Ethiopians felt elated. That day, the 123rd anniversary of the Battle of Adwa was celebrated. 21 days earlier, an Ethiopian feelings turned to deflated. That day, Ethiopian Airline Flight 302 was annihilated. 14 days earlier, I posted a picture of a goat to IG since it disrespected me by stepping on my new blue lace Nike sneaks. I felt like bugging out from Do the Right Thing. 7 days earlier, in an IG photo I posted, I wore one sock on my right foot while laying in a tent eating Oreos while reading a book. Yes, these are a lot of mundane details, but well, one day upon reflection, I tell you all these details connected to reveal a vision that became clear. It was also that fateful day the world received news it didn't want to hear. On March 31st, for all of y'all in LA, but I was 11 hours ahead, already into the next day, I awoke and checked IG to realize a friend who rarely posts photos had posted a photo to my surprise. I read the caption and began to cry. That was how I learned that he died. All right, so I read a lot, but let's go back. 28 days before March 31st, and it may not be exactly 28 days, but it was, I don't know how I came up with the 28 days, but it's accurate. It was 28 days. Okay. Let's see. All right, so March 1st. So that's actually 30 days before Nipsey. So anyway, okay. There's a reason why I had the 28 days, because it was the date on which it occurred, and then I was counting backwards to the days when these events occurred. Okay. 28 days earlier. Okay, so March 1st is the day on which Ethiopians celebrate the Battle of Adwa. And without getting into too many details about the battle, it was the victory of Ethiopians over the Italians. It was the single battle that defined African dominance over a colonizing force. And that is a significant event for all Africans, for all black people. And so that event is celebrated. Now, once you learn about the Battle of Adwa as a black person, then it resonates with you. It's a very important date. And so when I learned about it, I thought, man, I'm going to celebrate Adwa with the Ethiopians. Those are my brothers. Those are my cousins. I'm celebrating with them because we fought and we were victorious over the colonizing Italians. So on that day, March 1st, we were happy. We celebrated. But then, soon after, 7 days later, according to the poem, 21 days earlier, our emotions changed. And now we were saddened because the crash of Ethiopian Airlines. So I'm showing the contrast in feelings. This month, there was a roller coaster of events, of a roller coaster of emotions. We're up, now we're down. All right. And then I want to call attention to Instagram and what I was doing on Instagram 14 days earlier. I had an encounter in the desert with a goat. I took a photo of this goat because the goat stepped on my foot. Well, no, I took a photo of the goat because I'm from Los Angeles and I don't regularly see goats just roaming around my neighborhood. And that's what was happening in my neighborhood in the desert where I lived. Hope I mentioned that. By this time I lived in the desert. I was living in a Middle Eastern country. So let me make this very clear. I lived in South Korea where I worked as an English teacher. After South Korea, I moved to Saudi Arabia where I worked as an English teacher. Now, in this part of the poem, after Saudi Arabia, I moved to Oman, where I, again, worked as an English teacher. Those are the three countries in which I worked as an English teacher. So now that I'm recounting these events in the month of March in 2019, at that time I was living in Oman, teaching English, living in Oman. Oman is, it's a Middle Eastern country. They have deserts. They're close to the ocean. There's what else? There are mountains, a mountainous region, but it was hot and dry like a desert, okay, where I worked, where I lived. And on the day that I snapped this photo, there were goats roaming around. I would see goats, I would see camels, very few birds. I recall distinctly one time seeing a butterfly. And it was so peculiar because I was listening to Dick Gregory. I was listening to one of his albums, and he said the word butterfly. He was saying that two creatures that have lived for millions of years include the turtle and the butterfly. And as soon as he said the butterfly, I saw a single solitary butterfly. I actually saw this. I was jumping into my car going to work, and he said butterfly, and there was a white butterfly flying. And I thought, that is so peculiar. There were no other butterflies. We're in the middle of a desert. Where did this butterfly come from? And I saw it when he said it on the, whoo, spooky. Okay, but now the point. Dick Gregory was making the point that two creatures that have lived for millions of years, the tortoise and the butterfly. And he said, what does that teach you? What does that tell you? He says that tells you move slowly and I don't know what the other point is. Move slowly and be beautiful. You know, move slowly and softly like the butterfly. You have to listen to it. You have to listen to the Dick Gregory album to get the point. I have to listen to it now because I forgot it. But I remember he said for the tortoise or for the turtle, the lesson is to move slowly. So don't always be in a rush. Don't do all of this stuff. Move. Take your time. Take your time. The tortoise takes its time and it's still here. That's the point. So as I was saying, there was a goat. There was a goat. There were several goats, about 4 goats. I saw it. I wanted to take a picture. I wanted to send that picture. I wanted to post it to Instagram and then show everyone in Los Angeles, hey, look, this is interesting. Look at all these goats in my community. All right. So we're going to have to pause this and take up part 2 later. Okay? 36 minutes in. We're going to have to continue this. So part 2 coming soon. All right. We're going to stop now.